you guys, welcome back. So today I have another episode for y'all of High Priestess Transmissions, and we're going to be diving into something really important, because if you're walking a path of healing, spiritual growth, or feminine embodiment, you have almost certainly been here in this phase that I'm talking about. And today's episode is about the first stage of my framework, the feminine sovereignty path, and that stage is called the disconnected feminine. And before we begin, I just want to say something very clearly. This stage is not a failure, okay, by any means. It's not something to feel ashamed of or embarrassed about. Almost every woman on a spiritual or healing journey starts here. But this stage is very painful. It's very confusing, and for many women, it feels like being spiritually and emotionally just lost. So today we're going to talk about what the disconnected feminine actually is, what causes this stage, the chakra imbalances behind it, the emotional and behavioral patterns, and why it becomes the catalyst for awakening. Because the disconnected feminine is often the very beginning of transformation. So what is the disconnected feminine? The disconnected feminine is a state where a woman has become separated from her inner authority, her confidence, her intuition, and her power. And she is living life mostly through external validation and survival patterns instead of inner alignment. She may not trust herself. She may feel emotionally overwhelmed. She may constantly seek guidance, validation, or rescue from others. And on a deeper level, she often feels like something is missing, but she can't fully explain what that is or fully understand it or put a name to it. And a lot of women in this stage feel like they are drifting through life, and they ask questions like, why does everything feel so hard? Why do I keep repeating the same patterns? Why do I feel so lost? And this stage is energetic disconnection from the self, and also what I call soul fragmentation. Because when we go through things like trauma, abuse, childhood neglect, emotional neglect, chronic stress, nervous system dysregulation for a long period of time, and just a lot of traumatic life events, it can sometimes cause our soul to become fragmented. And that's what it feels like. She just doesn't have the knowledge and the understanding yet and the capacity to name that. Because how can you know that your soul itself is fragmented if you are disconnected from your intuition and your soul in the first place? Okay. So I want to talk about what triggers this phase. Because women are not born disconnected from themselves. This state usually develops through, like I said, life experiences and conditioning. And some of the most common triggers that I've experienced, and also I see a lot in my clients over the years, is childhood trauma or emotional neglect, growing up in chaotic or unsafe environments, and some type of instability, religious or cultural conditioning that suppresses feminine power, relationships where love was conditional, betrayal or abandonment, like I said, chronic stress and nervous system dysregulation, and also spiritual suppression or intuitive invalidation. And something that can be very harmful to children is when they have psychic or spiritual experiences very young. Like maybe they can see spirits or hear spirits or something like that. And they bring this up to their parents. And their parents either, talk down to them or gaslight them and say it wasn't real, or even drag them into a psychiatrist's office, God forbid, and get them on medication. When they might, I'm not saying that hallucinations don't exist. What I'm saying is not every single spiritual experience is a hallucination, okay? And what can happen is the woman or the child becomes disconnected from that spiritual gift. And as she goes through life, because she shut that gift down, she becomes disconnected from her intuition. And so certain things can manifest in our lives because we don't have that connection to our intuition, which ultimately causes more trauma. So it's very important to be nurturing and supportive of kids with spiritual gifts because a lot of them need that to navigate their life. But anyway, when a girl grows up in environments where her feelings are dismissed, her intuition is ignored or belittled, or her safety, physical, energetic, emotional, mental, whatever is unstable, she learns something very quickly. She learns that survival requires disconnecting from herself. So she begins outsourcing authority. She looks to others to define her worth, her identity, her safety, and her direction in life. And over time, that becomes her default way of existing. Okay. And this stage also shows up very clearly in the energy body. When I work with women in healing sessions, I see very consistent chakra patterns during this phase. The disconnected feminine usually has several specific imbalances. These can vary, but I do see a pretty consistent pattern. Okay. First of all is the underactive root chakra, because the root chakra governs safety, survival, and stability. And when the root chakra is underactive, a woman may feel chronically unsafe, anxious about the future, financially unstable, emotionally ungrounded, and like the ground beneath her is constantly shifting. The lack of instability makes it very, very difficult for her to trust life. So the nervous system stays in survival mode. And the next one is the overactive sacral chakra. And this one surprises people because a lot of people, when it comes to understanding chakras and the way that chakras like operate and unlock and open or close and stuff, they have a very textbook way of looking at it. And I'll give y'all an example. And I will make a podcast in the future about this. But a lot of people, for example, say that if your root chakra is blocked or underactive or otherwise imbalanced, that your sacral chakra, because the root isn't in good shape, automatically your sacral chakra is not working or not functioning. It's underactive. And if the sacral is underactive, then automatically the solar plexus is underactive because the energy cannot flow upwards. But you guys have to understand, energy is always circulating, okay? Damn it, I'm going on a tangent, whatever. We're just gonna roll with it. Energy comes two ways to us, to our bodies and our energy fields. One is from the heavens, from the divine, okay? And it also comes to us from the earth. And a lot of women have very open, very strong upper chakras, and they struggle with their lower chakras. Okay. But anyway, your sacral chakra is very powerful as a woman because we are the life givers. Okay. So your chakras can be all types of imbalanced, okay? It is not a one-size-fits-all. But what I am saying is within this phase, there's a very common pattern. The sacral chakra governs emotion, sensitivity, and relational energy. When it becomes overactive, emotions can become overwhelming because there's a lot of emotions stuck in our womb space, okay? That's where, if we are not cleansing ourselves regularly and things like that, we can hold a lot of negativity and trauma. So when it becomes overactive, emotions can become overwhelming. The disconnected feminine often feels like she is drowning in feelings. There's way too much water. her feminine energy is too feminine. Because yes, as much as I love divine feminine energy, if you are too watery and too feminine, you're going to have a rough time, okay? Just like the opposite is the truth. If you have too much masculine, you're going to have a rough time. But there's just too much water and no boundaries and no containment. So she may experience things like emotional flooding, intense attachment to others, difficulty regulating emotions, codependency patterns, feeling responsible for other people's emotional states. She's extremely empathetic, but she doesn't have energetic boundaries yet. So her emotional world becomes chaotic. Think about a river with no riverbed. You take that riverbed away, there's going to be a flood. It's going to flood the whole town. And that's what happens. Because she has no containment and no boundaries and no structure. The next one. Underactive solar plexus. And this is huge because the solar plexus chakra governs personal power, confidence, and self-direction. It's a very masculine chakra. The root and the solar plexus are the two most masculine chakras, just by nature. And when it's underactive, a woman struggles with low self-trust, difficulty making decisions, people-pleasing, self-doubt, and giving away her authority. This is often where the someone save me pattern lives. And the disconnected feminine unconsciously believes that someone else will eventually appear and fix her life. A partner, a teacher, a spiritual leader, a godparent, a friend, someone who knows better than she does. Because she hasn't realized yet that her own inner authority exists. Okay? And I'm not saying that when you're in this stage that you shouldn't seek out guidance. You probably would do well from having good godparents. You know, I know for me, having the godparents that I do has been very healing for me in a lot of ways. And when I met them, I was a fucking mess. I was in this stage when I met my godparents. Okay? But having good guidance in my life made the difference. But when you're in this disconnected feminine phase, it's easy for you to fall into the wrong hands, looking for that guidance. So you almost have to kind of pray about it and put it in God's hands and your ancestors' hands and ask them to lead you to the right people. Because if you don't do that, and if someone calling themselves a teacher or a guide comes into your life, and you don't ask your spirit guides and God about it, you can get swept up. That's what happened to me before I met my godparents. I was in very bad hands. Okay? So when you're in this phase, because your root and your sacral and your solar plexus are all out of balance, it makes you very vulnerable. The next part also makes you very vulnerable. An overactive heart chakra. And this is where many women get trapped. The heart chakra governs love and compassion. But when it becomes overactive without healthy boundaries, it turns into overgiving. So the disconnected feminine often gives too much, tolerates unhealthy relationships. She tries to heal or rescue others to her detriment, and she prioritizes everyone else's needs above her own. She may often feel guilty when she prioritizes herself, because she believes that her value comes from what she gives and not who she is. The next one is an underactive throat chakra. And this shows up as difficulty expressing needs, fear of confrontation, suppressing her feelings, diminishing her inner voice, and staying silent to keep peace. she often feels like her voice doesn't matter. So instead of expressing herself honestly, she adapts to what others want, or she adapts to make other people comfortable. The next one is an underactive third eye, and this chakra governs intuition and inner knowing. So when it's underactive, the disconnected feminine may feel spiritually confused or lost, disconnected from intuition, easily influenced by outside options or opinions, and unsure what path to take. So she may constantly seek readings, advice, or validation because she doesn't yet trust her own guidance system. Again, there is nothing wrong with seeking guidance when you're in this phase, but make sure it's the proper guidance, okay? If you would like to book a reading with me, which I highly suggest because I've navigated this phase and gotten out of it, you can go to sirensnectar.com/booking. And if you don't know which reading to choose, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Just purchase a general reading, okay? And I will help you because I know how you feel, girl. I've been there. Okay, the next one is an underactive crown chakra. And this creates a sense of spiritual separation. She may feel disconnected from God and her purpose, disconnected from spirit, or like her life has no deeper direction. And there can be this very subtle feeling of existential loneliness. Like she doesn't feel divinely supported. She doesn't feel looked after by God and her spirit guides. She feels all alone. So let's go over some common feelings in this stage. The disconnected feminine often experiences a mix of anxiety, emotional overwhelm, loneliness, confusion, longing for something more, fear of abandonment, and fear of making the wrong decision. There can also be a deep sense of spiritual homesickness, like her soul craves something and remembers something, but she can't access it yet. So mindset and behavior patterns. This stage also shows up very clearly in behavior. And some of the most common patterns include wanting someone to save them. That's a very big thing that a lot of women dealing with this phase go through. Wanting someone to save them. And it doesn't make them weak. Okay, it's a very natural, reflex for the feminine to feel this way. Because it has a lot of reasons for showing up. One of them is the fact that for a long time, for a lot of women, because of the oppression that we've gone through and the patriarchy, a lot of times when we were in bad situations, our only option was hoping that someone would save us, especially a man. Because for a long time, that was the only option we had, or die, you know? It can also manifest because they just are tired of life and tired of doing everything by themselves and feel like they're not capable of making good decisions and they just want someone else to take the reins and make decisions for them, things like that. And it's totally understandable if you feel this way. I've been there many times. I spent a good part of my 20s feeling that way. And if you're not careful, like I said, and I'm going to keep saying this because it's very important about this phase, having this desire to be saved can allow you to fall into the wrong hands and be very vulnerable to very bad people. And that doesn't mean weakness. It usually just comes from years of feeling powerless. So she hopes that someone will arrive to her who has the answers. A partner, a mentor, a spiritual teacher, someone who can guide her life. But this pattern keeps her disconnected from her own sovereignty. So this is why, if you are looking for guidance, find a woman who has made it out of this phase, who is strong and sovereign and empowered, okay? So that you can look up to her and she can teach you how to get there. Another thing is there's a lot of people-pleasing and fawning that goes on. She adapts herself and kind of contorts herself to maintain relationships. She fears conflict, so she says yes when she means no. And over time, she loses that connection to her authentic self. There's also a lot of emotional dependency because the root and the solar plexus are weakened. So she may heavily rely on others for emotional regulation. And relationships become the place where she seeks safety, which can lead to attachment wounds, tolerating unhealthy dynamics or abuse, and staying way too long in situations that drain her or hurt her in some way. Another one that shows up is chronic self-doubt. So she may constantly question, am I doing the right thing? What if I mess this up? What do other people think? And this self-doubt can keep her stuck in indecision and stagnation. So let's get into why this stage matters. And here's the paradox. The disconnected feminine is painful, but it is also the doorway to awakening, because eventually something happens. The patterns stop working, the relationships collapse, the exhaustion becomes unbearable, and the soul starts asking deeper questions. Questions like, who am I really? Why do I keep repeating this cycle? There has to be more than this. And that moment comes, and when she begins searching for truth, that's what moves her into the next stage of the feminine sovereignty path, which is the warrior phase, where she finally begins standing up for herself and taking leadership and control over her life again and reclaiming herself. So if you're listening to this episode and realizing that you have been in the disconnected feminine stage for a while, or maybe you're just getting there and you want to get ahead of it, I want you to hear this clearly. There is nothing wrong with you. This stage is not a failure. It's the starting point of transformation. But healing requires intention. And it requires learning how to reconnect with your body, your nervous system, your self-trust, your intuition, and your spiritual authority. Because sovereignty is not something that someone gives you. It is something that you reclaim for yourself and you rebuild and you remember. Okay? And if this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need it. And if you are currently in a deep healing season and want support, I do offer private healing sessions that you can book. If you go to sirensnectar.com/booking, they are my 90-minute healing sessions. And I also offer my 8-week container. It's called Soul Reclamation with Nikki, where we work very deeply with chakra healing, ancestral patterns, and spiritual alignment. And you can learn more about that at sirensnectar.com/healing. And I really hope this helps y'all. There's no judgment, okay, no matter what phase that you're in. Or as I make these episodes, you ladies might realize that maybe you're in between phases, or you toggle back and forth between 2 or even 3 of them. All of that is okay and completely normal, okay? But thank you for being here. I love y'all so much. I hope this helps you, and I will see you in the next transmission. Bye, guys.